Good morning, and thank you, sir, for inviting me to deliver this lecture to the forum. And I shall be briefly discussing the pathogenesis of SARS-CoV-2 infection and COVID-19 with a view to understand the clinical management of this new disease. So, as all of us know, this SARS-CoV-2 is the agent that causes the disease called as coronavirus disease 19, and this has caused widespread devastation across the world. And until now in India, we have more than 15 lakh cases, and this is increasing daily and is causing more and more number of deaths all across the world. And hence, it is important to understand why this virus is so deadly and what can be done at our level to prevent and possibly to treat disease that has set in. So, to start with the structure of the virus, the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 has this structure of a RNA virus, wherein this RNA is associated with the N protein, and on the surface of the virus there are these three different proteins: the envelope protein, the E protein, the membrane protein, and the S protein. And what is very important is to understand that this S protein is optimized for binding to the human receptor angiotensin converting enzyme 2, and this receptor is widely expressed in the lungs and in other organs like liver, kidneys, and to some extent in the upper airways. Because this virus is optimized for binding to the human receptor ACE2, as a consequence, its spike protein binds to ACE2 in the nasopharynx and hence is able to colonize the nasopharynx. And only in certain individuals, it spreads secondarily to the lungs where it causes a pneumonitis like illness and to other organs. But first, colonizing the nasopharynx, the initial minimal symptomatic or asymptomatic phase, because the nasopharynx is colonized, hence the virus can spread even if the person is asymptomatic, and that's what makes it most dangerous. So, although this virus has structural similarities to the original SARS virus and the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus, which were much more fatal, associated with much more severe disease, the SARS-CoV-2 has got significant case fatality rate, which is about ranging from 3 to 8%. It is lower than these two, but it is more dangerous because these two viruses had minimal ability to colonize the nasopharynx, whereas SARS-CoV-2, or which causes COVID-19, colonizes the nasopharynx, upper airways, and spreads even in asymptomatic individuals, then secondarily spreads to lungs in a small proportion. Hence, it is more difficult to control, and hence it is causing this kind of a pandemic, whereas SARS and MERS could be controlled by means of just isolating those patients, most of whom are symptomatic. Now, to understand the therapeutic targets, one needs to understand how this virus enters into a host cell and what are the immune responses that occur because of this. This is the virus as we had seen. This is a smaller version of the same figure, the mature SARS-CoV-2 virus with S spikes. Just note mature, I'll come to what happens during maturation. So this mature virus with the mature S spikes is able to bind to this receptor called ACE2. Let's say this is a pneumocyte. It could be any other cell as well in the body. So it binds to ACE2 on the cell surface, which helps it to enter the cell. And there are other receptors also that help in this binding. One of these is neuropilin 1, other is neuropilin 2, etc. And this binding with ACE and entry into the cell is further aided by molecules such as AP2 associated kinase 1. Further, what happens is once the virus is inside, it goes into the endosome, wherein it can interact with toll-like receptors. Since this is the RNA virus, it can interact with toll-like receptors 3 and 7. And what happens after such interaction is it can stimulate downstream inflammatory pathways in the nucleus. And further, there is secretion of inflammatory cytokines and cytokine storm, as all of you must have heard at some stage or the other. and this involves various other molecules known as JAKs or Janus kinases. Further, the virus itself cannot replicate. It uses the cellular machinery of the cell to synthesize viral proteins and secretes them. However, what happens is that this initial viral protein that is synthesized is immature. And on the cell surface, there is another molecule called as TMPRSS2, which matures the S spike to make it into a mature S spike, which can now enter into other cells. So understanding this pathogenesis helps us to understand what are the various therapeutic targets. So as you can see, various non-specific therapies like vitamin C, vitamin D, in general have antiviral properties. Hence, they may have some protective effect, although evidence is not much. There are certain molecules that have been identified to be cytopathic to viral cultures, like mefloquine, cefaranthine, selamectin. These are, some of them are undergoing clinical trials. The important message here is the binding to the ACE2 receptor. Hence, initially there was a lot of controversy about the use of ACE inhibitors, but subsequently no definitive evidence could be gathered that ACE inhibitors are harmful to these patients. Then this AAK1 molecule is inhibited by a Janus kinase inhibitor called as baricitinib, so it may help to reduce viral entry. Then you have this viral replication, which involves RNA polymerase enzyme, since this is an RNA virus. So here you have drugs like remdesivir and favipiravir and protease inhibitors, lopinavir, ritonavir. None of them has been definitively proven to be useful, but that is the reason why people are exploring their use, because of the inhibition of RNA polymerase enzyme, which is used by the virus to replicate. Further, as I told you that this immature S spike is matured by the TMPRSS2. This can be targeted by a molecule called as camostat mesylate. This is again undergoing clinical trials. Now, once the virus enters the endosome, it interacts with toll-like receptors, and this is highly dependent on the pH. Acidification of the endosome by drugs like chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine decreases the endosomal TLR interaction and hence may help reduce some of the downstream inflammatory pathways. Once the inflammatory pathways have set in, then this involvement of the Janus kinases could be abrogated to some extent by use of drugs like baricitinib. And once the cytokine storm has set in, that's when people are trying therapies like interleukin 6 blockade through tocilizumab and other anti-cytokine therapies. So that is the rationale of the various drugs that are being used. And corticosteroids have an overall immunosuppressive effect, and hence they possibly may help in the cytokine storm phase of the disease. So the cytokine storm is something which has got the attention of physicians all over the world. It is nothing but in mild COVID-19, there is little secretion of inflammatory cytokines. What happens is that this virus causes tissue damage and releases something called as pathogen associated molecular patterns or damage associated molecular patterns. There are certain molecules like HMGB1 and others. And normally what happens is the body is able to suppress these responses, is able to clear them out. However, there is a dysfunction of the regulatory responses, as a consequence of which the inflammation goes on unchecked. And hence, in COVID-19 of increasing severity, there is more secretion of these pro-inflammatory cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 6, interferon gamma, IL-1 beta, and hence you have a hypercytokinic phase or the cytokine storm. As rheumatologists, we often have to encounter a disease called as macrophage activation syndrome. I'm sure hematologists and other specialists also come across this, often in the setting of infections. Here what happens is there is a dysfunction of the regulatory responses of the natural killer cells. Therefore, macrophages action is unchecked and they release lot of inflammatory cytokines. and cause a cytokine storm all across the body. What is happening in COVID-19 is a local kind of hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. To put it very simply, this phenomenon is occurring in the lungs rather than all across the body, and in a minority may occur all across the body, and hence is causing a lot of local inflammation. And once this inflammation has set in, it is the virus has mostly done its job. It's caused the tissue injury. It is the body which is not able to down-regulate the normal inflammatory response that occurs following tissue injury, that is causing a lot of this damage. And hence people are trying therapies like corticosteroids, like interleukin 6 blockade with tocilizumab and other targets. So what is important to understand here is that these are the features of classical macrophage activation syndrome: non-remitting high fever, cytopenias, abnormal liver function tests, coagulopathy, and you see hyperferritinemia, increased ferritin levels, and you see a lot of these features actually occur in severe COVID-19. You have lymphopenia, which associates with severity. You have thrombocytopenia. You have abnormal liver function tests. You have abnormal coagulation parameters, hyperferritinemia, and fever is a prominent feature. And hence, this all comes in the spectrum of macrophage activation syndrome. Why I wanted to share this slide is because don't be worried when you see abnormal liver function tests in this such a patient. It is due to the disease process per se, rather than anything else going on in the liver. Sometimes some of you may have a hesitation to use drugs like tocilizumab because it is relatively contraindicated when there is abnormal liver function test. But here the abnormal liver function test is a part and parcel of this disease per se. Unless you are going to take care of the cytokine storm, this abnormal liver function test will not resolve. So clinicians often have to take borderline decisions, and here I would not be worried if there are abnormal liver function tests and I have to use tocilizumab and I feel that it should be used. In such a situation, I would go ahead and use it despite the abnormal liver function tests, with caution of course. So understanding the pathogenesis helps us understand these clinical features of the disease that are causing these abnormalities and what we should be doing in such a situation. Interferon response is a very important response to viral infections. Normally, when the virus attacks, it causes secretion of interferon alpha and interferon beta, which in turn act on the interferon receptor, which in turn causes activation of pathways which lead to decreased replication of the virus. Through various mechanisms, this SARS-CoV-2 virus is actually causing decreased type 1 interferon responses, as a consequence of which the cell is unable to initiate those mechanisms which are causing protection from the virus. And therefore, people are now trying inhaled interferon beta as one of the therapies, and a recent clinical trial also showed potentially beneficial results. But again, these are preliminary results. We know very little about this disease, and the knowledge in this area is evolving every day. Another important problem that is occurring in these patients is they have been found to have high incidence of venous thrombosis, of pulmonary embolism, of strokes. So what is occurring here is that there is an increased risk of thrombosis in these individuals. And why is it occurring? It can be explained by, if you go back to your pathology days, you must have read about Werkow's triad, which is nothing but endothelial injury, stasis or flow abnormalities, and a hypercoagulable state. All these three are occurring with this virus infection, with SARS-CoV-2 infection. The endothelial injury is resulting in a milieu that is prone for thrombosis, and as a consequence of this, because of the thrombosis, there is turbulent flow and stasis, which is further promoting thrombosis. And normally when thrombosis occurs, mechanisms come in which try to dissolve the clot. But here, such mechanisms are also being inhibited. Therefore, people are trying therapies like tissue plasminogen activator, because this is being inhibited during this viral infection, so that the clot that is forming is not being able to be dissolved. And there are macroclots, there are also microthrombi, and hence there is hypoxemia. Hence, people are using therapies like heparin to prevent the thrombosis or to reduce the ongoing thrombosis, and recombinant TPA is being explored in the setting of clinical trials to dissolve the clot that has already formed, and various immunomodulators, as we said, for cytokine storm, and other drugs like baricitinib and anti-tumor necrosis factor alpha agents are reducing the immune activation which was causing the endothelial injury in the first place. And of course, antiplatelets, hydroxychloroquine may have some effect on the activation of platelets as well as on immune activation and on stabilizing the endothelium. So people are trying heparin for COVID-19. It acts via various mechanisms, not only through reduction of clot formation, but also renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system activation is reduced, and the microthrombi formation is reduced. And therefore, there may be a potential benefit for those with severe COVID-19. Finally, coming to immune therapies, one of the therapies that has got a lot of attention is the antibodies, plasma therapy. Convalescent sera, what they can do is they can neutralize the viral particles, but it is useful only if you have a lower antibody response in that particular individual. In somebody who has a good immunoglobulin G response to the virus, you are not going to benefit by giving convalescent sera. But in those who do not have a good immunoglobulin response, then neutralization of the virus particles may help. And also, convalescent sera may contain some antibodies which can dampen activated macrophages and neutrophils. This is another mechanism by which it might help. And all of you are aware of these vaccination strategies which are being desperately tried in the hope of getting a vaccine. The attempt is to get antibodies which are protective and against the stable viral components, that is the N protein and the S protein, because all viral proteins are prone to mutate, but these are less prone to mutate, more stable. Hence, it is possible that antibodies to these may protect against viral infection, or even if we can reduce its severity in those who are vaccinated, then that would also be a success. Let's hope and pray that we can get a vaccine in the next few months so that we can get past this pandemic. But one must be aware that not all antibodies are necessarily protective. Certain antibodies, particularly IgM antibodies, in other SARS infections have actually been shown to help in viral entry. Because what happens is this antibody, through the FAB portion, it binds to the virus, and through the FC receptor, it binds to the cellular FC receptor and helps to internalize the virus. And this is called as antibody dependent enhancement. So just be aware that not all antibodies are protective. So to conclude, to be very honest, we do not have a definitive therapy for SARS-CoV-2 infection. So what can we do at this time? At this time, there are only two things that we can do. One is maintain social distancing. Second is universally use a mask. What happens if you universally use a mask? It has been, or it is a hypothesis that is accepted by many people, that the actual viral load that you are exposed to during the first infection actually determines severity. So if your viral load can be reduced by using a mask, the virus is there in the aerosol, it is there in the environment, it is circulating. But if at the time of exposure the dose is reduced by wearing a mask, it is more likely that it may cause a less severe disease, asymptomatic disease, and just pass by. That is probably the reason why healthcare workers are quite severely affected, because they are inherently exposed to a much higher viral load in the ICU when in contact with SARS-CoV-2 infection or COVID-19 patients. And so all we can do is universally mask. All of us wear mask, all our colleagues wear mask, so that even if we are asymptomatic, we are secreting lesser virus into the atmosphere. Even if we are not affected, we are, whenever there is exposure, we are getting a lesser quantum of exposure. Let's hope that we can get a vaccine, but until that time, all we can do is social distancing and use a mask. And in severe cases, obviously, there is a cytokine storm. So if there is evidence of cytokine storm in the form of hyperferritinemia, abnormal coagulation parameters, abnormal D dimer or increased LDH, increased C-reactive protein, then drugs like tocilizumab may be useful. And it is generally recommended in these patients to also give therapeutic anticoagulation with heparin, and other drugs like tissue plasminogen activator are being tried in the setting of clinical trials. Corticosteroids, tocilizumab, and other immunomodulators help dampen the hyperactive immune response of the host, and plasma therapy helps supply exogenous antibodies against SARS-CoV-2. Therapeutic anticoagulation in view of thrombotic risk and also potentially drugs with endothelial stabilizing action may have some role. That is all that I have. Thank you.